Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 58. I know that because it's written in front of me, of The Followers. Today we were joined by Shannon Beer. You may have recently heard one of our recent podcasts with Dr. Gabrielle Fondero, where she worked herself and Shannon have their own collaborative business going at the moment with coaching coaches as well as clients as well. But Shannon came on today to speak a little bit about her background and how she approaches, I suppose, coaching and nutrition, and deals with things like body image and so on. I, for one, I think Shannon is a wealth of knowledge in this area, and I thoroughly enjoyed the topics that we went through. How did you? What were the big standouts for you today, Murph?
Yeah, it was really interesting. We just, just got dug into body image and how, like, it's not what your body looks like, it's how you perceive what your body looks like, and then just the discussion around what is health towards the end.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating just to see just the actual complexities that are there that often maybe can get overlooked. So yeah, I suppose without further ado, we'll jump into today's episode. Enjoy.
A couple of weeks ago, we had Dr. Gabrielle Fondaro on, and you're working together. I just automatically assumed at the time, and from looking at some of your social media and stuff, that you're American, and then like listen to a few podcasts over the last week, doing a bit of research. This is like, oh, such a lovely, calming British accent there. How did you end up becoming in contact with Gabrielle and starting off the direction you have currently been going with the comprehensive coaching?
I actually met Gabrielle at a conference in London. And then I did a year basically of traveling and going to different conferences around the world. So we met up in London, had a good chat with her. And then we met again a few times in different locations across Australia. And then we just stayed in touch, mostly via Instagram, just talking about, I guess, general things that had been catching our attention. And we noticed that there had been a little bit of a dialogue around intuitive eating with a few misconceptions, asking about, well, is intuitive eating appropriate for athletes? And we were like, well, we're kind of missing like the whole point here. So we were having a discussion about it. I had an article written on intuitive eating and which Gabrielle reshared. And then we decided just to write our own article addressing sort of some of the things that we'd seen. And it kind of just spiraled from there. So one article turned into an article series. It got a good response from our audience, who then requested a webinar series, which is when we just kind of ended up formulating an entire framework for coaching that we've termed comprehensive coaching, which draws from motivational interviewing, acceptance and commitment training, cognitive behavioral coaching, as a sort of way to bridge a few gaps that we've been seeing in the industry. So not only the gap between sort of different camps, like the pro-diet versus the anti-diet group, but also the gap between coach and client as well. We know from both of our experiences that we've worked with a number of people who've sort of had, I guess, off-putting experiences with coaching. And I know a lot of coaches struggle with feeling like they're on the same page with their clients. So we wanted to come up with a framework that sort of addressed all of those issues, which is what we did. And yeah, it's kind of just expanded from there. We sort of meet on a weekly basis. We always have a bunch of things that we want to work on. And yeah, we're just working towards improving, I guess, the dynamic and in the industry through creating a common understanding. We value different perspectives, and we want to be able to bring people together to sort of help people achieve what it is that they want to achieve, rather than we're all sort of talking about our own ways and not really getting anywhere. So yeah, I guess that's how it all started, and it's been over a year and a half, 2 years, I don't even know anymore. But it's been a really enjoyable pursuit for both of us.
We're going to dig into that comprehensive coaching in maybe 10 or so minutes. But a few other things we want to just look at first. But like, you're largely working internationally now. You don't have to be settled to one base. But you originally came from like a law background in that. How did you end up coming towards the nutrition route or even health coaching route?
So I never really intended to. When I did my law degree, it was more so just an opportunity to move out of home and live in London. I was like, what am I supposed to do now? And I wasn't really sure what to study. So law was just something that I was doing to bide my time. It seemed like a reasonable thing to do, but I soon realized that it wasn't something that I was particularly interested in. So after that, I started thinking, well, what am I interested in? And I found that I was spending more of my spare time just learning more about nutrition. So I heard about Mac Nutrition, the online sort of nutrition qualification, and was like, oh, that sounds like a great idea, because I'd always intended to go traveling after my degree. So I was like, well, this way I can kill two birds with one stone. I get to travel and enjoy myself, but also have something that I'm working towards at the same time. And I picked up a few clients just from working at home. I spent some time working in a CrossFit box, ended up talking to the members there, and it just sort of came from that. And then I spent some time on a working holiday visa in Australia, and I worked with an Australian coaching company. And then after a year or so, I ended up working on my own, because I had a different direction that I wanted to go in, which I guess will kind of touch upon like some of the issues that I was noticing in regards to like body image and like coaching practices. And with the work with Gabrielle, I just found that there was a certain direction that I was going in. And that's kind of just, it's all happened, I guess, somewhat organically. And I just feel like I'm just going with the flow. And I always say to Gabrielle that I'm just pootling along and who knows what's going to happen next type thing. Just responding to what I think people need and doing my best, to be able to do that.
And you mentioned there body image. It's something you've done a few bits about. Like I was looking at that booklet, the ebook you've put out about it as well, and I think it's an important one that we can possibly look at. I think the focus around it, or the impact it's had on the population, has increased a lot, possibly with the rise of social media, and that they are, particularly through Instagram, inextricably linked there in some way. And it's often an underlying motivator for people to want to diet, to exercise, and often to the point of obsession. And it's also kind of that meeting point of physical and psychological, because it's your psychological perception of what your physical body looks like, or appears to look like, to others or to yourself. How did it kind of rise to prominence with yourself at the start?
Well, I was actually reading a lot of research into dietary restraints, because I was trying to figure out exactly where we would draw the line between sort of flexible and rigid dietary restraint, given that we would typically assume, say, something like macro tracking is very flexible, but it didn't seem to be so in practice. So I was reading the research into dietary restraint, and a lot of the time body image would come up due to sort of the association between more rigid forms of dieting and body dissatisfaction. So I began doing some research into body image, because it seemed very relevant to the populations I was working with. As you say, a common motivator for wanting to change one's appearance is body dissatisfaction. And when someone's coming as a client to lose weight, I wanted to make sure that we would do so in a healthy way, and only doing it if it's actually going to make a difference in someone's life. And often it would go the other way, super restrictive with their eating behaviors, a lot of sort of self-sabotage, missing out on social occasions, a lot of critical self-talk. And I was trying to understand, where does all this sort of come from, and what can I do to help them with these problems? So I did a lot of research into body image, and what was very useful about that is that I could see what I was reading in research happening in real life with the clients that I was working with. So they would say one thing, and that would trigger something that I had read about. And I was like, well, this all kind of makes sense now as to why it's such a problem. And then I thought, well, if body image is the issue, as you mentioned, it's more of a cognitive or psychological construct, in that it's much more to do with the way that we perceive ourselves rather than what our bodies actually are in reality. And that perception may be flawed in the sense that it's not accurate. So people may see themselves differently and have certain feelings associated with that, and then begin to behave in different ways. So if someone is dissatisfied with their appearance, or a lot of their self-worth is tied up in their appearance, it's very important for them to look a certain way, then they may experience thoughts that are quite self-critical about their appearance, and maybe quite self-conscious in social situations. And then as a result of that, they may act in certain ways. For example, somebody may step on the scale, see a number that they don't like, tell themselves that they're a failure, or that their weight isn't good enough, and then go to extreme lengths to diet and restrict that day. So you can see how the way that we view ourselves and the thoughts that we have, the feelings associated with those, and the behaviors that we engage in are all tied up. And that sort of indicated to me, well, if I actually, what I want to do with people isn't just to change their body composition. Like, I really couldn't care less what any of my clients look like. I just care that they're happy with themselves and their lives. And as a result of that, it became very clear that simply helping people to diet and lose weight isn't going to be enough, and may not even be the right thing for some people, even though that's what they feel like they need at that moment when they're signing up for coaching. So I did a lot more research into body image and into interventions designed to improve someone's body image. So not just knowing what it is and how it operates, but actually knowing, well, is there something we can do here? Like, how can we work on this? And is there a way to integrate this with nutrition coaching? And it turns out there is. So that's kind of now what a lot of my clients come to me for. Is often they will have a physique goal, but they also recognize that, maybe there is some additional work to go alongside that. And they want to find a way to balance their goals with their nutrition, their goals with their training, and their goals with their lifestyle. So that's kind of where all of that came about.
And with you just mentioned there, Shannon, that a lot of your clients are coming to you knowing that this is how you approach things and all that. How do you find dealing with someone maybe who comes to you but isn't fully aware of that? Somebody who just has that maybe rigid mentality of, this is a scales thing that I'm working on, or this is an image I have in my head, which can obviously be a consistently moving goalpost for people. How do you kind of start off your approach with people like that, maybe who aren't, they don't particularly want to hear, oh, we'll keep your health in mind, we'll look at your lifestyle, we'll try to make sure you're enjoying what you're doing. Is there any kind of, I suppose, tips or bits of guidance, say, for any coaches listening, they could be looking to incorporate into, I know you mentioned motivational kind of interviewing, stuff like that. Are there initial steps that you would use to try and bring someone like that on side, or how do you approach someone like that?
Absolutely. And this is really important because oftentimes as coaches, we may be able to spot what we perceive to be an issue in the way that a client is acting, or like goals that they have for themselves. For example, someone with body dissatisfaction really wanting to diet, to change their body. And it's very natural to want to help in a way that actually ends up being unhelpful, in the sense that we can't force anyone to do anything that they don't want to do, or that they're not ready for, or that they don't see the value in. So if that is the case, and somebody is very caught up in dieting and going to sort of extreme lengths to do so, then I think one thing that's really helpful is, firstly, by doing as much as we can to raise awareness, maybe outside of the one-to-one like coaching interaction. So for example, a lot of my clients find me on Instagram. So a lot of the content that I put out on there speaks to body image, because most people probably aren't aware. I think it's very natural for people to believe that dieting is the answer, because of sort of the social and cultural environments that we are living in. We know that the media, as you mentioned at the start, has a large sort of impact in the way that we view ourselves, or what we would associate as success. So of course, it's very common for people to want to change their body composition, and it's not necessarily a bad thing either. So if someone would benefit from working on their body image, it's probably because something's going on that is actually causing them distress in some way. So they may be engaging in pretty restrictive dietary habits. They may notice that their feelings about themselves haven't changed, even as they've got closer to a weight loss goal. So I would just begin by evoking awareness around that. If there's a reason for someone to improve their body image, you've got an indication as to why. Like, you can probably see something going on in that client's life. Otherwise, body image wouldn't be a problem for them, so there's a reason that you think it would be beneficial. So just helping someone to see that what they're doing is causing them some kind of harm. And it could just be one exercise that I like, which is drawn from acceptance and commitment training, is creative hopelessness. So showing someone that what they've tried in the past isn't working for them, and if you continue to do the same thing over and over again, what do you think is going to happen? So that could be the case of like restrictive dieting. They're like, yeah, well, it does work whilst I follow it, but then I can't keep it up because I'm missing out on life. I'm craving all my favorite foods and I'm thinking about food a lot and I just don't want to live that way. Well, then helping someone to see that, well, what happens if you carry on? You mentioned that you end up sort of gaining the weight back. What do you think would be different about this time? Is there another way that we could approach things? And asking a client what they think they would like to do. And sometimes they'll turn around and say, yeah, I can see that this is a problem, but I just don't know any alternatives. And that's your opportunity to ask for their permission to potentially provide them with some information or some guidance, to give them an overview of what their options are. When we talk about body image work, people are like, what does that mean? Like, I have no idea what's involved with that. And why would you? So sort of explaining a little bit about the process, like, hey, I know that your goal here is to improve how you feel about yourself, improve your confidence so that you can have more time and energy to dedicate to the other important things in your life. Would you like to learn a little bit more about some additional work that we can do alongside your nutrition coaching so that you don't have to wait until you've achieved your goals until you start feeling better? You can learn how to feel better about yourself right now, which actually might make the process of achieving these physique goals easier because it removes like some of the self-sabotage. And once they're like, oh, okay, yeah, what is this? You've piqued my curiosity. Yeah, please tell me more. And then you can sort of explain, well, there is some other things that we can be doing here to sort of assess why you feel the way that you do, and maybe making some changes. It could involve things like keeping a body image diary, challenging some of your thoughts, and thinking about the way that this impacts your life and areas of your life that you may have been neglecting. And we can do all of that. What are your thoughts on that? And then someone will either say, yep, sounds like a good idea, let's go for him, or they may not. And if they don't want to do that, then that's up to them. You've done you've fulfilled your role here in offering sort of information and guidance. But again, if somebody doesn't want to do that or they're not ready at that stage, that's okay. We have to respect someone's decision. So I think that we can do our best by trying to change some of the messaging that we put out and being very careful about the way that we promote our services, or making it clear that there are other options available, and expressing that to our clients with their sort of permission to offer a little bit more information, but ultimately respecting their decision either way.
It's one thing that just came to my mind as you were mentioning all that was, I suppose, the tendency of nutrition coaching or personal training coaching to display results through image on the left, image on the right, and it's very clear that it's a body image, it's a weight loss most of the time. It's maybe increased muscle mass and that, which can be great, but if you're comparing a before and after of that, I can imagine that like I've experienced that with clients, that, and I'm just looking for your own insight into that, just I suppose maybe the negative impacts that can have on somebody who maybe is looking to actually improve just their health, improve everything that you've just mentioned there, or just have an impact on all those things, but they only know it as a kind of a weight loss approach. And I don't know, how do you, I feel like the industry itself is kind of has to hold its hand up and go that it maybe ran before it could walk a little bit with stuff like that. But how do you feel like that's improving any bit, or the impact of it is changing?
I'm not sure whether or not it's improving, because I only sort of see my own small corner of the industry, and I tend to follow more sort of people who promote more balanced overview. And I'm often surprised at some of the things that, say, my clients may have seen and been subjected to, and the types of accounts that are still out there. So I don't know whether the industry is changing on a whole. I definitely see some positive sort of movement in thinking about these broader sort of concerns, which is great. But the issue with the transformation photos is that, like, of course we want to celebrate our clients' success, but as you say, by promoting, hey, here's what they looked like before, here's what they look like now, like what a great success that's been, it does sort of lend itself to reinforcing the idea that our success is tied up in our physical changes. And much of the work that I do with clients, like, you probably wouldn't even notice a physical difference, but the way that they feel about themselves is dramatically different. And that's what, again, I want to help people achieve. So, but in that sense, a before and after is not relevant. And there's been a bit more research recently on the role of social media in terms of impacting people's body image, and whether we can use social media to foster a positive and promote a positive body image. And it seems that the images themselves are more important than the captions. So we may think that we're doing a great thing by posting a before and after and being like, yeah, this person is so much more confident, they've gained so much more strength, and highlighting some of those like non-scale victories. But the caption itself is usually pretty ineffective. People are just going to see the image, and that's going to be the first thing and the main thing that they take away. So promoting a diverse range of appearances, if we're going to use bodies at all, or ideally using images that aren't appearance focused, would be the most helpful in terms of promoting a positive body image. And we don't even know if we can really do that. It may just be that, hey, let's just not add more harm. We don't know if we can make any like positive changes just through social media. So I think that's like an important thing for us to consider. It's a lot of responsibility, and that's for sure, and we're never going to get it right 100% of the time. But I think just to be conscious of our impact through the things that we are promoting online is something that I would say is like a part of the job. You know, it is an obligation if you care about the well-being of people who may be viewing that content. And unfortunately, I think the risk of posting before and afters outweighs some of the potential benefits in terms of marketing or whatever it is. Because I do think there are other ways that we can be doing that be less risky.
And I know that, and I'll stop pestering you about this now in a few minutes, but I know that you have you're the part of your business with Dr. Fondero on coaching coaches on how to actually approach coaching clients and that. But and I think that is fantastic, because it's an area that I feel is very open to interpretation. You can learn the science, you can do a Mickey Mouse course if you want it, because things are so loose in our own nutrition, especially in our own diet. But I would just like to know your thoughts on maybe if you feel there's gap there in the education of nutritionists there that maybe could be looked at, instead of depending on maybe the market. So just say the three of us here have our own individual coaching companies. We're coaching coaches in different ways, and you know that obviously the market then kind of takes off in its own way. But do you feel there should be more of an overriding kind of control in place for what, you know, is what kind of education is applied to people looking to become nutritionists first day in that regard, in that coaching regard, outside of what we know from a scientific perspective, just from the actual coaching, the messaging, and that?
Because I'm not sure in terms of like control what can be done to better regulate the industry. I think it's a very difficult thing to do, but I do think that there would be a lot of benefits in having more options available in terms of further education, because I feel as though part of the issue is that our education and development as coaches has been very much geared towards, oh, let's learn more about nutrition, let's learn more about training and become like absolute pros in that. Whereas actually, I think we need a broad range of skills. So how about communication for coaches, for example, like the motivational interviewing? And I know that that comes hand in hand with certain qualifications, but not all. So I'd like to see like an increased availability in things like that. But also, I like to compare, I've drawn a lot of inspiration from different sort of therapeutic models in terms of, because I think the relationship's important. You know, we're not doing therapy with our clients, but it is a one-to-one sort of trusting and safe environment that we're trying to cultivate. And I know that therapists have to go through a lot of training hours that are supervised. And I was thinking, we don't have anything like that when it comes to coaching. There's no need or like requirement for supervision before you can achieve some sort of level of accreditation. It's just sort of, yeah, you can do this any online course, off you go. Most of your clients probably won't even check to see what you're qualified in. They just want to, get the results. And if it looks like you're achieving results online, then they're going to go for you no matter what. So how do we sort of prevent things like that? And it's a very difficult question. I don't know how we can do that, but the reason that I think it's important is because when you're working with someone on their nutrition, it's not just their nutrition that you're working on. Like we see nutrition, but broader education is very necessary. And yeah, some form of regulation. I just don't know what that would look like, but I certainly do think that it is an issue. And that's partly why Gabrielle and I are trying to not only increase awareness, but also foster a collaborative sort of environment, because many coaches that I've worked with, so we do our webinar series, but we also do one-to-one coaching as well, as in mentoring other coaches. And through my mentorships, I've worked with a number of coaches who are just very scared they're like, I see all these issues. I'm scared to do anything now because I don't want to be causing any harm with my clients. How do I find sort of my voice in that sort of messy middle gray area? And it is something that's very difficult to navigate. So, yeah, I mean, do you have any ideas? What are your thoughts on this? I think it's a really interesting question.
I don't. Well, I think about it quite a bit, but again, like that, I it's like it's a deep void I struggle to figure out what's best to do. But your recommendation there around post qualification, actual, supervisory setup, that to get an accreditation, that you have some steps to go through there to show that, yeah, you are actually, you have the aptitude, the application, you understand what you're approaching. And for me, you mentioned that you'd have coached who are really scared that they're not, they're unsure of where to go. I rather hearing that than hearing that somebody's scared. They're like, oh, I need to know so much more, I need to understand so much more, than what I tend to see quite a lot of. So I know, like you mentioned, you keep your feed to kind of the almost the bubble that you you appreciate, you're looking to follow. I kind of keep a little bit of both sides of things I don't agree with, and things that people that I do appreciate as well, so that I can kind of keep myself in, like, what is the rest of the community out there like. And I see a lot of things that I'm like, whoa. And these would be from people who are really bubbly, really, interesting, really fun people who really care about their clients, but their approach can be very locked down. And I feel that something like you mentioned there would be great, something like a supervisory role, but because it's unregulated, the nutrition, like, you don't have to. We could just do a weekend course, and that's not going to go, okay, you've done our weekend course, but now you need to sign up here before you can actually work with someone. So there are some there's a lot of there are a lot of open ends, but for me, it's just getting the conversation going and continuing the conversation and pushing that conversation on to see, well, what can be tried, what can be discussed. I would love for, say, things like the AFN, they have a decent framework in place, but I don't feel like it's necessarily used as well as it could be. So I think that there are some things in place that could be expanded on and improved upon, but as long as, I guess, nutrition is open-ended and anyone can kind of just turn up and work in it, if that, as long as it's that open-ended, I feel like you're really just hoping that the right people step up and that they attract in as many clients as possible to take care of the masses. But yeah, I didn't expect you to throw it back on me. I'm delighted you did, but it is something that I do kind of wrestle with a little bit, just trying to figure out where things can go.
Absolutely. I do feel optimistic about the way that the industry is headed. I do think at least we're acknowledging that this is an issue. And I think the next step, as you say, is just to continue to sort of think about how we may be able to improve those standards. But yeah, I think that's why I sort of wanted to throw it back on you. And even if like the listeners have any suggestions as well to like feedback to us, because we all sort of are aware that it can be an issue, but I think the answer is not necessarily as clear cut as we would like.
And a lot more collaborative work too between maybe people who study like mental health coaching or psychology around eating disorders, different things like that, and bringing that community closer to the nutrition community. I know Joe O'Brien is fantastic. Head first for anyone listening, he's brilliant in that field, and he's really working hard in that area. But again, there are few. There are a few people that I follow. Again, they're on my good side. And I'm like, yeah, I look up to these people. I follow these people. These people are full of really cool ideas and really, I suppose, interesting approaches to this whole area. But yeah, it's how do you drag all those over to meet the opposite end as well. So yeah, no, it is fascinating, and I would be optimistic too. I do think that the voice on social media, the power of voice on social media, if it's consistent and it's the messaging coming from the likes of yourself is constantly, coming out and speaking out, that it does make its way into larger sections of the industry.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's very important, if we don't know the answers, to at least embody certain characteristics, like a willingness to listen to different perspectives, open-mindedness, humility in our own knowledge, and sort of an awareness of what we don't know, so that we can, as you say, learn to collaborate with others who have expertise in different areas. So I feel like things are moving in the right direction, and hopefully it's only a matter of time before we see some of those more standardized practices being put into place.
That's great. Well, I guess actually, I know we didn't kind of go into it too much at the start, but I'd love to know like what your own interest in nutrition actually really came from yourself. Like, I know you looked at Mac Uni to go down that line, but why nutrition? What was it about that you were like, oh, this is a bit of me?
Yeah, it's really difficult to say. I think that I began getting interested in nutrition because I wanted to learn sort of more about, how could I be healthy? I was moving out, cooking for myself, and I was always sort of active because my mom is actually a personal trainer, so it's very much like in sort of tune with, right, it's important to feel healthy and strong, and that helps me with other things that I want to do. So I wanted to learn a little bit more about nutrition, just had like a genuine interest in it. And then partly, I guess, how I began to sort of learn more about other things is that I realized nutrition really isn't the be all and end all in terms of improving health and overall well-being and quality of life. It's like, oh, that's one piece of the puzzle. But once you sort of hit a threshold of being like generally healthy, however you'd want to sort of define that, there's then so much more that you can do to improve your well-being and sort of get more out of your life. So that's why my focus is sort of shifted. But I think it all comes back to just wanting to feel energized and feeling confident and clear on what I'm doing each day in terms of having a sense of direction. All of those sorts of things are important to me. And I think nutrition is just one sort of part of the overall picture in terms of like feeling your best and making the most of what you can do. Like, I want to be able to say travel and have the energy to do like a crazy hike on the weekend, something like that. I just don't want to be held back from life by my own health as much as I can. There are some things that you have no control over that's going to happen anyway, but as much as I can, I want to sort of take care of myself so that I can do things that I want to do. So that's where the interest, I think, sort of came from. And as I say, it's now expanded beyond nutrition because I realized that wasn't sufficient for the purposes that I had in mind.
That really lines up with something I heard you mention before, it's going back a few months, on Danny Lennon's podcast with value setting. And would you dive in a little bit more into maybe difference in goal and value setting, and how you came to that came to viewing things like that, and what they actually are?
Of course, there are more and less effective ways to do so. But one of the questions that I had for my clients is like, well, why? Oh, I want to achieve this, this, and this. Okay, why? Why do you want to do that? What's the purpose of that? And I think sometimes when we set goals, we do so for reasons that may not be immediately obvious to us. For example, I could set myself the goal of increasing my wealth. And that could be for a number of reasons. It could be because I want a sense of security, or I want some stability, or I want freedom to do things that cost money, whatever it is. Or it could be because I feel obliged to reach a certain level of income because of social pressure. So there's now like multiple different reasons for wanting to achieve one goal. And the reasons behind why we pursue the goals we pursue are actually very important, because they can influence the way that we go about them. For example, taking it back to this financial goal that I may have, if my value behind that is freedom and security, or freedom, flexibility, the going about that in the sense of working super long hours so that I never have any spare time, I don't see my friends because I'm always working just to hit this arbitrary number, well, then I'm not actually living according to that value of freedom, because I actually may already be earning enough to give me the freedom to do the things that I want to do. Whereas if I had that value in mind, that would help to guide me in a clearer way. So when we take it in terms of someone's eating behaviors and their nutrition goals that they set for themselves, they may set themselves the goal of losing X amount of weight because they want to increase their confidence. But why do they want to increase their confidence? Well, actually, I just want to be able to be more present in social situations rather than worrying about how I look. So maybe the value behind that is connection with others, or I want the confidence to go out on the weekend and wear what I want and go and do all these different activities that I feel too self-conscious to do. So then the value may be like flexibility or fun or adventure or whatever it is. Now, if we have this value of flexibility that's guiding our goal setting, then going to extreme lengths to diet actually is not aligned with our values. So I think there's always a reason behind why we're doing what we do, and probably multiple motivations and multiple reasons. And I don't think that we're always clear on those things. So by sitting down to think about what it is that's important to us, we can ensure that our goal setting is serving the purpose of helping us to live in alignment with these values that we already hold. And the benefit to this is that values in that sense are far more flexible than goals, because if we set these goals, I'm going to lose X amount of weight, or I'm going to achieve X amount of income, then we may sort of blindly pursue those goals no matter what, because that's the goal I've set for myself. Why am I doing this in the first place? Because things change as well. Situations change. You may set yourself a nutrition goal, but then what if things happen in your life, work gets out of hand, you've got family things going on, is that goal actually enhancing your life anymore? Or is it time to put it on hold or pivot in a different sort of direction? So keeping in mind what it is that's important to you, I think just helps you to be more flexible in your goal setting process, and actually making sure that your goals are enhancing your life rather than being driven by maybe more external sort of which could be more problematic, especially when we're thinking about this in terms of, say, motivation. Or autonomous motivation is internally regulated, is usually associated with either success in achieving our dietary goals, but also less stress in terms of like emotional vulnerability, because we all like the sense of feeling like we're the ones making our own decisions rather than, oh, I have to meet these standards so that other people approve of me. So getting in touch with your own values, I think, can help to bolster that internal regulation and sort of protect you from moving in directions that aren't making you happy overall.
That's a great explanation. and it's something I found very interesting when I did hear you mention it a few months back, and have tried to look into a little bit more myself and apply a little bit more. But that it's almost a novel approach, in that we do see a lot of goal setting, and they can, while it can be really beneficial, it can actually set in real rigid posts for people. So yeah, no, that's a very more, I guess, a bit more intuitive. It's a bit more allow. It has the ability to allow life, as well as working towards your own targets, which is great. Murphy, you had some questions on intentional eating, or along that line, had you?
Yeah, we were just going to ask. It would have followed on from like just talking about nutrition coaching and stuff in general, but how you go to intentional and intuitive eating, but how like there are four kind of quadrants of where people tend to, well, not tend to, but where they can base their eating around, or what guides their eating, and how it can fit into one of the four of them, and kind of how each circumstance or each situation will be dependent on the life situation or which one they're being guided by. Could you just give us an overview of the four quadrants?
Yeah, so Gabrielle and I have coined what we term intentional eating to reflect the fact that somebody's dietary behaviors and the way that they may go about modifying or monitoring those really is down to them. And there's more than one way to do things. So we know that macro tracking, for example, is very common, and it seems to be a bit of a default go-to. Oh, you want to make changes to your nutrition? Here, track your macros. You'll learn so much, which is definitely helpful. But we wanted to raise the point that, you know what, that's not always helpful for every client in, you know, every situation. And actually, there are different forms of eating that can be guided by internal cues or external cues, and there are forms of eating that are helpful for weight modification, but also different forms of eating that are helpful for weight neutral sort of approaches, which seems to be, you know, what, weight neutral, but my client wants to lose fat. You know, that seems to be a bit of a new thing, or something that we're not used to considering. And we wanted to raise the awareness of that as well, that actually is a lot of validity, and we can make changes to someone's health, improvements to someone's health, changes in their dietary behaviors without focusing on weight. And there may be different ways of eating that are more applicable, or more helpful for that goal. So we talk about hunger training, macro tracking, mechanical eating, also different tools that enhance awareness of internal cues and adaptive eating patterns, alongside intuitive eating and mindful eating as well. And it's not to say that one is better than the other. It's just that here are all these different approaches. We've conceptualized them in a quadrant to show you, oh, this one, if you want to, you know, modify someone's weight and we're looking for an externally regulated approach, this is where macro tracking may fall, for example. And knowing that we can move between the different quadrants as well. So somebody may be starting off with a macro tracking approach and then decides that they want to transition away from that. So what are our other alternatives there? So that was the reason that we wanted to talk about that. And we actually have a webinar series starting next week that goes into more detail on the intentional eating spectrum and putting it into practice. And I also think that it's designed to bridge that gap between, as we mentioned, like, oh, client wants to do this, actually I think this could be more helpful. How do we navigate that? So spirit of sort of motivational interviewing, or as we've coined our own attitude of comprehensive coaching. So it's a way of sort of meeting the client where they're at and offering more tools to help them reach their goals, which may or may not be weight focused, could be weight neutral, maybe internally regulated or externally regulated, or maybe they'll do a bit of everything, you know, at different stages.
Because you do have to be mindful of like where a client is at based on various stages of their life, whether they're like just learning a little bit about nutrition and an awareness of what they're actually eating for the first time, but also where they are in terms of how busy they are, work schedules, life schedules, all like that, and how different things need to be factored in so that they can have, I suppose, some element of success. And it's not success the term in your diet, as opposed to like, you know, oh, I had a good day which was successful, I had a bad day which was successful. How you balance that out, but also just allowing for real life situations.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing that we tend to neglect is actually considering a client's history and their own experience with different approaches. Let's track macros, let's go for it. And we may take that for what it is, just, all right, then you said you wanted to do this, let's do it. But we don't tend to think about, oh, well, what is your experience with macro tracking in the past? And they may say, yeah, it worked for me, didn't really like it because of XYZ, but I feel like it's the only way to reach my goals. So let's do it. That's your opportunity then to think, oh, well, maybe this approach isn't helpful for this person, So not only should we consider what a client wants to achieve, their current life circumstances and what would be most helpful, but also their experience as well of things that they've tried in the past, and things that have worked and things that haven't worked. And that may help us, again, to guide a potentially more adaptive approach for them.
I suppose to support the coach to, like you mentioned, be able to pivot from one to the other as needs be. Just to ultimately support the client as best as possible. I suppose, is there anything else in that line, Murph, that you want to chat about? I suppose we've spoken a good bit so far, Shannon, on your obviously nutrition coaching, guidance, the areas that we see kind of needing to improve, but we've mentioned health quite a number of times, and so it would be great for us, for our listeners, to get an insight from you. Just what is health, first off, where you view it from, and maybe how you go about maybe looking to discuss that with a client.
Absolutely. So this is one of my favorite questions, because I've been thinking a lot about what it actually means to be healthy. Because like some of our clients come to us and they say, yeah, I want to achieve this this goal. And I also want to improve my health. Or that may not be an explicit goal, but that's a goal that I would like to help people achieve. Because health is just something that I think that personally is important. So of course that inevitably guides my coaching. But then I started to think, well, what is health? That's kind of an abstract concept. We can't see health, so how do we go about defining it? And the way that we define health determines the way that we strive towards it. So I've been thinking a lot about that, and that's sort of another research area of interest. I came across a model of Flourishing Health it was in a couple of papers by Vanderville. I think one was 2017, one was 2019. And he took a broad stance on health and identified different domains of health. So he included happiness and life satisfaction, physical and mental health, meaning and purpose, character and virtue, close social relations, and then financial and material stability as a means of achieving the other 5 domains of health. And that made a lot more sense to me, because when we're thinking about nutrition changes, we may initially think, right, this is to improve someone's physical health. Well, actually, nutrition can affect someone's mental health as well. But then even outside of that, what about their life? We always say, oh, healthy eating, it's a lifestyle. Well, what else is important then in someone's lifestyle if the goal is to be healthy? And the interesting thing about that is that I think everyone sort of has their own definition of health and what that means to them. But we may be able to identify some sort of key variables that would go into an overarching model of health. And I also came across the Somato psychosocial semiotic model of health, which is sort of like the biopsychosocial model, but with the semiotic component, which just sort of pertains to like sense making, meaning. That's where I would put sort of the values work in. So maybe even like spirituality and support, as well as their social environment, their work, the housing, like the environment that they live in, as well as their physical health, as well as their psychological health, which could be mental health, it could be well-being, it could be their education. All of these things are important for living what I would like to call flourishing health. And recently I've sort of been exploring the idea of what is mental health, because mental health is distinct from mental illness. So you can have mental illness and mental health at the same time. This is sort of inspired by the work of Keyes, who distinguished between flourishing and languishing. So languishing being like not sort of necessarily experiencing any clinical symptoms of different sort of mental health issues, but just a general sense of like meh, in your life. Like we've all kind of felt like that from time to time, like, you know what, like things are all right, but I don't really feel like I'm sort of flourishing in any aspect of my life. Whereas flourishing health would be sort of the quote unquote optimal in terms of, yes, like your sort of overall have a positive attitude to life. You're also resilient in the sense that you can deal with setbacks. You have a sense of direction, all these sorts of things. So I was thinking, well, in terms of coaching, like, yeah, I like it began with nutrition coaching, but if we're talking about health coaching now, well, then are there other things that we may be able to do to improve someone's overall health in the sense of helping them to flourish? And of course, we have to be very careful about what that means, in the sense of, again, we're not diagnosing, treating, or anything like that when it comes to mental illnesses, but we can actually put steps in place to improve someone's mental health. And this could be in the form of helping them to reframe certain thoughts that may be limiting them. So that's sort of part of what the body image work may involve. Or if we're looking at the research on positive psychology, it could be in the sense of like gratitude interventions, or enhancing someone's ability to savor the present moment or find flow in different aspects of their life, which may be very applicable to athletic populations, for example, because sports performance can be a common experience of flow for many people. And thinking about all of these different ingredients that go into, again, always thinking about, from my personal sort of philosophy, is like enhancing life and health as a means to do that, or at least attaining health so that we can live that sort of full and flourishing life. So yeah, I thought a lot about what it means to be healthy and how we can go about that. Another interest of mine, if I have a bunch of sort of, here's all the research areas that I'm interested in. One is I'm very interested in social relations and social health. So then I sort of have been thinking about looking at research on, say, social anxiety, again, not to help people with these specific disorders, but I think that I actually spoke to Joe Bryan about this recently, about how we often pathologize certain conditions that are just experience. So you've got, say, body image issues. You could have clinical levels of body image issues in terms of like body dysmorphia. That would be more on the extreme end. Or you've also got people who have all felt self-conscious from time to time. So there's like different degrees of, say, common experiences, and I think we can learn a lot from different psychological approaches in terms of just helping us to navigate the more challenging aspects of life. So I'm interested in how we can enhance our social relations and improve like interpersonal effectiveness, improving our communication, which is why I like the motivational interviewing techniques. And again, that sort of ties into some of like the areas of body image. Now that I've got a decent global overview, I can sort of look more into specific niche areas, and I'm looking at how someone's body image may affect their social functioning, because that falls into the picture of what it means to be healthy. So that's kind of how my mind works, with all these different sort of bits that I'm trying to piece together. But I do think that considering health from a more, I guess, global perspective is super important, even when we're actually only working with someone's nutrition, because, as I say, you can't really distinguish these things. You're working with a person, not an energy balance equation. So considering their life and their overall health is important, because when you change one thing, that can have knock-on effects to other areas of life. So it gets kind of complex and abstract, but I think it's actually very important and applicable to the people that we're working with, and to ourselves as well.
That's a very comprehensive take on what sounds like a simple question, but it really is not. There's quite a bit there, and I really like the just a bit you touched on there, that we could have an impact on one aspect of someone's life, but if we're not taking into account how that could ripple throughout the rest of everything that makes them them, whether it's their work, sleep, it could be anything. That if we're not really looking for that global understanding of an individual, then we really are just pulling ourselves back to working with an equation, and that really is removing the individual from the situation. So I think it's for me anyway, that's a very important point for anyone listening to take away from today. That's brilliant. Well, I've actually ran out of questions because I ramble too much, so I'm trying to limit myself a little bit. But Murph, have you anything else?
No, Shannon, that was absolutely fantastic there. If someone wants to, you mentioned you have a few webinars and stuff coming out over the next few weeks. Where can people find those? Or if someone is interested in comprehensive coaching, how can they learn more about that or potentially get involved?
Yeah, so we have the intentional webinar series starting next week. It may be possible to catch a replay of that if that's already gone ahead by the time that the podcast is released. So I'd keep an eye on, we have a website, btgcoaching.com, but also I guess Gabrielle and I's social media accounts are probably the easiest place to find us. So my Instagram is one that I'm most active on, so that's @ShannonBeer_. I also have a website where you can learn more about the different services, whether that's the coaching mentorship or one-to-one coaching. But I also have a bunch of articles that I've been working on. So I've got one on the topic of what it means to be healthy, if you like to kind of learn more about the idea of flourishing health. I've got a few coming up on body image. I also have a body image webinar series. So there's like a bunch of stuff that you can find on there, and that's shannonlbeard.com. But yeah, I'd appreciate if anyone wants to chat further about anything, just to reach out, to let me know your thoughts on, some of the topics that we've discussed. That would be awesome.
Oh, lovely. Thanks a million for your time today. I'm sure people will get loads from that.